Good afternoon, dear viewers and listeners who are following us on YouTube. So we are continuing with our second panel of the day, organized by the African Hub. As you've been following since yesterday, this conference on refugees, migrants, displaced persons belonging together in solidarity has been organized by the Global Ministry University in California, Tangaza University in Kenya, Harmony Institute in Kenya, Hekima University College in Kenya, together with our brothers from Uganda and Malawi. So we've just had a very wonderful panel organized by Hekima University College under the leadership of Professor Elias Sopongo. Now we are moving towards Uganda and Malawi, and the panel is being led by Brother Rogers Mwansa, who is an alumnus of the Hekima Institute for International Relations. And Father Elias, I think, is happy to have one who is a student and a colleague on the panel. So, Brother Rogers, you are most welcome. Just to say that Brother Rogers is working in the vicariate, newly created vicariate for refugees, migrants, and displaced persons in the Diocese of Arua, and they have big settlements, and they work together with the Jesuit Refugee Service in collaboration. So don't want to give much introduction of you, Brother Rogers. You are most welcome to lead us with this panel, talking about the experience of host communities in Malawi and in Uganda. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Really grateful to be part of this conversation, and especially that we will be talking more about negotiating belonging, the experiences of migrants, refugees in Uganda and Malawi. And we are also happy that we were preceded by our great Professor Elias, who has really been so instrumental in some of our lives, and also getting to learn more about the issues of migration and possible strategies of interventions. Here on my panel, I have three people who will be more instrumental in our conversation. Maybe just to introduce them in brief, we have Augustine Pahemuka, will be one of our speakers. He is an academic writer and peace enthusiast based in Uganda, and currently at Laudato Si Youth Initiative. He is also a writer in the Daily Monitor on the issues of peace, religion, and society, and has authored journal articles on climate change and migration, refugees, non-violence, financial inclusion, and human trafficking. He has previously worked in the banking sector in Uganda and Kenya as a professional in customer experience and business development. He holds a BS in biomedical laboratory technology, peace studies and international relations, a master's, as well as he is currently enrolled at Uganda Management Institute and MBA studies. His research area of interest includes peace building, refugees, climate change, migration, and forced displacement. On the second speaker is Titani Alfred Chalila. He's a lawyer from Malawi, a principal law reform officer with the Malawi Law Commission. He holds a bachelor's degree in philosophy and LLB honors degree in law. As a lawyer and a law reformer, his work involves educating citizens on the law of Malawi. In addition, he also helps out special law commissioners through research on law reforms projects being carried out in Malawi. He was among the programs officer who helped the commissioners in their initial work of the Special Law Commission on the review of the Refugee Act in Malawi. This opened his mind to refugee and migration issues. The work exposed him to the delicate balance the state has to strike between upholding human rights and also furthering the interests of the country. Through his experience, he is eager to share his experiences, and we will be happy to hear more from him from the perspective of Malawi. We also have Angela Yauma Mwafulirwa, a Malawian as well, a highly qualified and experienced legal professional with a Bachelor of Law obtained from the University of Malawi. She was called to the bar in 2022 and has worked in both private law firms and government settings, currently serving as a principal law reform officer at the Malawi Law Commission. She plays a crucial role in reforming, reviewing, and developing laws to ensure they align with constitutional and international legal standards. In addition to her general duties, Angela focuses on refugees and asylum law as a member of the Secretariat to the Special Law Commission on a review of the Refugee Act in Malawi. So my panelists, you are most welcome to this important conversation that we will be having shortly. In view of that, I just want to give a context of our conversation by submitting something that will put us together. And when we begin making a conversation, we will have a streamlined thoughts among the panelists. Our theme of the conversation is negotiating belonging, the experiences of migrants and refugees in Uganda and Malawi. In recent years, the topic of migration and refugee integration has become increasingly relevant on the global scale as individuals flee from the conflict, violence, and persecution in their home countries, such as in the Democratic Republic of Congo, South Sudan, Mozambique, some Horn of African countries, countries in the Sahel, and many others. They often find themselves in unfamiliar territories, navigating new cultural norms, social structures, and policies in their host communities. In view of that, this panel delves into the experiences of migrants and refugees in Uganda and Malawi, shedding light on the complexities of their journeys towards acceptance and belonging. Uganda, often praised for its progressive refugee policies, stands out as a beacon of hope for those seeking safety and stability, with generous allocation of land for refugees, provision of basic services, and humanitarian ethos that permeates throughout the country. Uganda sets a positive example for the rest of the world. Refugees in Uganda are granted freedom of movement and access to some essential services that includes education, healthcare, food security and nutrition, water sanitation, and psychosocial support, among others, creating an environment where they can begin to rebuild their lives. However, the road to integration is not without its challenges. Despite the supportive policies in place, refugees in Uganda face obstacles such as difficulty in naturalization, internal conflicts among refugees and the host communities, limited access to the labor market in rural areas, limited employment opportunities, social and cultural barriers, gender-based violence, legal and limited employment opportunities, together with administrative barriers, traumatic experiences, housing, living condition, and community tensions, to mention but a few. These hurdles can hinder the process of integration and disrupt the sense of belonging that migration and refugees strive to achieve in their new surroundings. On the other hand, the refugee context in Malawi presents a different set of circumstances, with refugees hailing from countries such as DRC, Burundi, and Rwanda, East and Horn of African countries. Malawi grapples with its own challenges in providing a safe haven for those in need. The policy landscape in Malawi undergoes constant review, and this, our colleagues in Malawi will help us to understand even a bit more, and revisions to accommodate the influx of refugees and ensure their well-being in the host community. While maintaining an open border for people seeking safety, The government of Malawi has historically taken a restrictive approach to managing refugee situations by making several reservations to the 1951 Refugee Convention. Its domestic legal framework reflects these reservations, and consequently, refugees face restrictions on their freedom of movement through the encampment policy, experience limited access to social services, and restricted from employment. Amidst these trials and tribulations, the voice of migrants.
Can we switch off our mic, please? Okay, thank you. Go on, Brother Rogers. No, you have muted yourself, Rogers. You have muted yourself. Okay.
Is it okay now?
Now, yes, yeah.
All right, thank you so much. Yeah. Amid these trials and tribulations, that the voices of migrants and refugees themselves offer valuable insights into the nuances of their experiences. By listening to their perspectives, we gain a deeper understanding of the intricacies of migration dynamics and factors that shape individuals' journeys towards integration. Through this lens, we can begin to comprehend the complexities that migrants face in navigating a new cultural and social landscape, as well as the role that host communities play in fostering a sense of belonging and acceptance. In the spirit of Fratelli Tutti, Pope Francis's encyclical on fraternity and social friendship, we are called to embrace migrants and refugees as fellow human beings, worthy of dignity and respect. As we explore the narratives of migrants in Uganda and Malawi, we are reminded of the importance of viewing them not merely as statistics or figures, but as individuals with hopes, dreams, and aspirations. By recognizing their humanity first and foremost, we can work towards creating a more inclusive and supportive environment for all members of society. In conclusion, I would say the life and experiences of migrants and refugees in Uganda and Malawi highlight the complexities and challenges that arise in the process of integration. By delving into their experiences and shedding light on the obstacles they face, we gain a deeper understanding of the ways in which individuals can support and empower migrants and refugees in their journey towards acceptance and belonging. Through dialogue, empathy, and solidarity, we can pave the way for a more inclusive and welcoming society for all. So this is the context in which our team will be operating and discussing to ensure that we get to delve much more deeper into the lives, the voices, and the experiences of the refugees and migrants. And in the conversation, I would welcome Augustine Behemuka to try to show us the context of Uganda. As we know, Uganda presents a unique experience of open door policy. It is one of the countries hosting the highest number of refugees in Africa and the world. And Augustine, you have had an opportunity to work and interact with Eritrean refugees. I would ask you to share with us a bit more how the experiences of refugees in Uganda in relation to reception and integration into the host community. What are the challenges and joys of these refugees, particularly looking at the Eritrean refugees whom you have had opportunity to work with and interact with? You're most welcome, Augustine, to give us your understanding and experience. Your mic is off. Your mic.
Yeah, sorry. Thanks, Bill Rogers, and for the introduction and sharing just the context. Thank you to the organizer of the conference. My internet is a bit shaky. I don't know if you will permit me to dim my video so that I don't use a lot of bread with it. Yeah, sorry about that. So Just to share with you the experience of refugees in Uganda, just a little bit of a background. Like you've rightly said that we have Uganda prides to be to have a liberal, progressive refugee policy. A liberal in that it gives refugees, migrants, and asylum seekers a little bit of alternatives within the legal framework. For instance, refugees can get work permits. They have free movement, whether within the refugee settlements or even within towns like Kampala itself. They can own property. The law provides for that. And then they can own businesses. Here in Kampala, you will see many businesses that are being run by Eritrean refugees, being run by Ethiopians, being run by the Somalis, who have a very interesting business acumen. And from a banking experience, refugees can own bank accounts. All you need to have is a refugee card that is issued by the office of the Prime Minister. And then the letter from the Prime Minister's office again, which is easily accessible. With those two documents, refugees will be able to open up an account in any financial institution in Uganda. So these are some of the liberties that have been provided by the law that Uganda prides about when it talks about the open door policy. As it stands right now, the total population of refugees in Uganda has been oscillating between 1.6 to 1.7 million for the last 2-3 years. But as it is now, the last time I checked on the portal, it was about 2 million. Of course, we know of the situation in Goma, which definitely triggered an upsurge in the refugees from Congo crossing into the borders, seeking safety. When it comes to reception, generally speaking, Ugandans, the host communities in Uganda have been receptive to refugees generally. Of course, albeit the few points of tension that come about with high populations. We have things like issues of competition over resources, natural resource competition over opportunities, business opportunities. Yes, so, and this is true for both the refugees based in the settlements and also those based in the urban towns. So the self-settled refugees within urban centers. For my presentation this morning, for the discussion, this afternoon, sorry, I will, like Brother Rachel said, I'll share the experience from the Eritrean refugees for two reasons. One, because the Eritrean refugee the situation has been growing in Uganda since from the mid-2000s, 2015 up to now. It has been growing. We see the population of Eritrean refugees in Kampala, for instance, has grown probably to about now 60,000 refugees. If you check on the total, on the portal that is powered by UNHCR and also the government of Uganda. And two things come into play when talk about the refugees from the Eritrea. The root causes we hear that from the stories that you hear from them. One is the repressive government back at home, especially when you speak about the forced conscription. In Uganda, we have something called mchaka mchaka. It's more of a training. In Kenya, it used to, I think it is it NPS? I'm not so sure if I remember very well. It's a program where young men, probably after high school or after university, give some sort of military service to the government. So in Eritrea, it was made mandatory. The government has made it mandatory, and there are cases of, from the stories you hear, there are cases of abuse there. There are cases of, on paper, one is supposed to serve for about a year, 6 months to 1 year, but then you have those who have been serving indefinitely, 10 years, 15 years. So many of the young people are running out of the country so that they do not get involved in this case of forced conscription. And then we also have repression of the civil liberties, especially the freedom of worship. There are only four religions that are recognized by the government. Of course, the biggest is the most predominant being the Orthodox, Eritrean Orthodox Church. Then you have the Sunni Muslims, and then you have the Roman Catholic Church. There is Pentecost. The Pentecostals were banned, and so you have many of them pastors and also those who subscribe to that religion who are serving long prison terms just because of their religious worship. So many of them also flee because of that. Then lastly, we have a conflict. We know Eritrea gained their independence from Ethiopia in 1993, which brought an end to 30 years of an armed liberation struggle. But then one of the issues that remained contentious was the borderline, the Badam, which the borderline that is shared south of Eritrea and north of Ethiopia. And in 1998, a war broke up for those 2 years, 1998, until there was a peace deal that was signed in 2000 that brought a bit of calm. It was a short but very armed, and it triggered a huge humanitarian crisis. So we had an upsurge of refugees from Ethiopia from Eritrea crossing into Uganda. That should have been around 2006, 2005, 2004 there. And then we had the Tigrayan War. That is 2020, 2022. The Tigrayan War was principally between the TPLF and the Ethiopian forces, but the Ethiopian forces fought alongside the Eritrean forces. We have Eritreans who are caught up in that war, and also many came through. And that was around, of course, that coincided with the COVID-19 crisis. So a lot of things were happening at the same time. So as it is now, we have almost about 60,000 Eritrean refugees being housed in the country. Many of them, Brother Roger spoke about integration. I'm not so sure we can speak about integration, because for them, many of them would tell you they are seeking opportunities for asylum, so that they seem to be on their way to either Europe or any other countries in the West, in the US, and whatever it is. So Uganda gives them that time. It's more of a waiting time as they seek alternatives on how to make the next move. Speaking about their challenges, the first one is language and the cultural shock. As you may know, Uganda hosts a number of refugees: South Sudan, Congo, Ethiopia, and Eritrea, Burundi, and Rwandan. But now the interesting thing about many of them, you notice, is that there is a bit of, would I say, commonalities, yes, culturally. For example, if you look at the South Sudanese refugees and look at the people in the West now of Uganda, that's the northwest part of Uganda, there are some tribes, there are some ethnic communities that share language and many other foods and all that. And then when you look at the people, the Congolese refugees who come from Eastern Congo, and then the communities within Western Uganda, a bit of similarities again. So we have those cultural similarities, so that when they come into Uganda and they in the refugee camps or settlements, it is easy for them to integrate. Many of them even learn the language and you may not even know. For the Eritrean refugees and Ethiopian refugees, the story is a bit different. Our cultures are a bit different. Our first language is English. You have for the Eritreans and the Ethiopians, it is not English. So fitting in here, language barrier is a bit of a problem. And remember, many of them are urban-based here in Kampala and the metropolitan. So Kampala is central in Uganda here, and the dominant ethnic community is Luganda. So the largely spoken local language is Luganda, and then a bit of English. So they struggle, you know. So how do you buy food? How do you interact in the market? You know, especially for those who cannot speak English. So there's a bit of language barrier there. And of course, with language barrier comes, you know, people who opportunists, I would say, those who manipulate the situation. So we have issues of, I will speak about fraud that is closely linked to language barrier in a bit. Number two, I would speak about self-sustenance and high cost of living. Yes, so what has happened to the Eritrean refugees is that many of them depend on remittances from back at home, from their, not back at home, from their family and who are based in the large diaspora communities in the West. They send in money for them to, you know, for self-sustenance, to pay rent, to meet their school fees and food and all that. But, and then another one is businesses. However, when you speak to them, they'll tell you there are those who do not have these families abroad who can send them something. There are also those who are struggling to find, you know, small jobs within Kampala to help them survive. And so what means is that they depend on their friends, you know, their local networks and social connections within. But as you may guess, these also can get overstretched at some point. And so there's a bit of challenge there when it comes to the cost of living. And also maybe to speak about that from the perspective of host communities, the city dwellers in Kampala, there is this stereotype of largely thought that Eritreans have a bit of money, you know, they spend a lot, they are sent money from their relatives abroad. And so what happens is that when they come to buy something, there is that tendency to manipulate them, to cheat them. An item that goes for 5,000 shillings Ugandan, they'll end up buying it at 10,000. You end up paying double. And so this also comes in with the issue of language barrier, but also this whole stereotype that they have money, their relatives send money, which is not really the case. Because the relatives also work hard abroad to actually get this money to send to them. Through we have political, the Eritrean community also has their own internal, you know, political dynamics. Sometimes they're suspicious of certain persons who, you know, quote unquote, maybe we'll talk about spies who probably want to pick information from them and feed it back to the home government. So they also tread carefully within themselves. And so this comes into their casual conversations. They have to watch the kind of casual conversations they have with even us, as you know, as we interact with them, as we do this research, and then they take a bit of time to know who is this I'm speaking to. So we just have to be clear with what we are saying and also with the intention, so that they can know that it's really for research purposes. Then there's also been a common complaint among them. Like I said, many of them are here to seek asylum and also, you know, find their way to, brother, when it's time, you let me know, please, and also find their way to Europe. But reports have it that for Eritrean refugees have the lowest asylum application rates, successful application rates. In other words, their rejection rates are high. When you speak to the authorities from immigration in Uganda, they will tell you, so Uganda gives, the government of Uganda gives awards asylum. However, the criterion is prima facie. Prima facie basically means face value. In other words, for instance, for somebody who has crossed the border from Eastern Congo straight into Western Uganda, they are received at the border and then they are screened and then they are reported in, you know, so that's prima facie. But now for the Eritreans, many of them, their entry into Uganda is what we will probably call what literature terms as irregular movements. In other words, they get they pass, you can imagine the journey from Eritrea to Uganda. It is either through Ethiopia to Sudan to Kenya, then here, or from there through to Kenya to here. So there are about 2-3 countries they move through before they reach Uganda. And then there is no documentation for each of those. So the authorities here in Uganda will tell you, now, what do we do? This person has come from Eritrea, but they've moved through 2-3 countries, and there is nothing to show. So then it becomes, many of them on that for using that as a criteria, you notice that the rejection rates are high, and which the Eritrean refugees have not taken so lightly. They feel they're being marginalized. Yes. So, and then we spoke about fraud. Now we have fraudulent middlemen who manipulate situations. It's an interesting one here because there is fraud that has been reported on both the Ugandan side and the Eritrean side. From the Ugandan side, it is usually in 2 ways. One, like we spoke about the asylum seeking application, you can imagine the bureaucracy that is involved, and then all the documents are in English. And now English happens not to be their first language. So in most cases, they need these middlemen to help them sign here, sign there, let me take for you the file. In that process, they begin asking for money here, money there, and then the Eritrean refugees really feel it becomes a very tiring process. You feel cheated. You don't know what is happening. You have this middleman who tells you when you call him tomorrow, hey, wait, I'll call you, that kind of thing. But then also we have cases of fraud within the Eritrean refugees and asylum seekers themselves. For instance, one of the issues in Kampala here, when you talk to the host communities that has come up, is when you look at, there's a common, one of the suburbs in Kampala here, where many of them are, is along Gaba Road. Gaba Road is a road that carries a number of residential areas. You have Muyenga, you have Buziga, you have Kabalagala, and Nsambia and all that. So the Eritreans have are very common in that area. And they have kind of pushed, in quotes, the Ugandans who reside in those apartments in that area. And so many of the host communities will tell you, no, these guys, Eritreans came, they pay a lot of money for rent, so the landlords want them more than us, so they've pushed us out into the peripheries of the town. But then when you speak to the Eritrean refugees, the story is different. They actually are suffering. One of them actually told me, what happens, brother, is we have middlemen amongst us, the Eritrean refugees, who, they go and they collude with the landlords in Uganda and tell them, hey, how much is the house? Maybe it is 300,000 or 400,000 Ugandan shillings. And then the middleman will tell, okay, fine, tomorrow I'll bring you a client. Then he goes and brings a Eritrean refugee and instead of telling them 300,000 for the house, they'll tell them 600. So the poor refugee is going to end up paying 600,000 per month, and sometimes they pay 6 months upfront. So you can imagine they have been cheated by almost 300,000, almost 1 million, 1.8 million Ugandan shillings. That is probably about 60,000 Kenyan, 60,000, 62 Kenyan shillings, 62,000 Kenyan shillings. So you can imagine.
Concluding slowly by.
Yeah, let me conclude.
We are 15.
Okay, let me just bring this to a conclusion. So that is that's the case on fraud. And then maybe for the joys, I will talk about, one is they're happy to be here. They see this as a place of safety. They have really put up their business acumen. As you may know that one of the Eritreans are one of the top leading business people in Juba, South Sudan. But when the war broke out in 2018, many of them migrated their businesses into Kampala here. And so there's a lot of business among them. They have employed both their Eritrean fellows, but they've also employed a number of Ugandans. Then also we talked about freedom of worship. In Uganda, they worship freely. Those who want to join Pentecostals, they join Pentecostals. Those who want to worship the Catholics, they join with the Catholics. I'm happy to learn that I've not yet visited the community, but I have an appointment within this month Gaba National Seminary, which is one of the national seminaries in Uganda, training for priests. They provided space for the Catholic Eritrean refugees for worship on Sundays. So when the seminarians have finished their church, the Eritreans occupy their chapel and they're able to worship and commune, and it is a Sunday. The cathedral in Rubaga has provided the same space for them. And it provides a space for regrouping and also a way they can help themselves to reconstruct their life. So I'll leave it at that for now. And thank you, Rogers.
Thank you so much, Augustine, for this elaborate explanation and giving experience of the Eritrean refugees. Indeed, Uganda is a home to many refugees from many parts of East Africa, Southern Africa, and Central Africa. And Uganda gives them a space to be able to find themselves and navigate in the process of integration and finding a sense of belonging. And not only limited to the Eritreans, but wanted to focus more, Augustine, on the aspect of the Eritreans because he has greatly involved with them. I've been working here in the north of Uganda, and I interact much more with South Sudanese refugees. And I must say that they have both positive and challenging experiences in the process of integration. And they give experiences of their own. In our intervention here as missionaries of Africa, working in collaboration with the Diocese of Rua, as well as GRS, we have seen that the aspect of building peace between the refugees and the host community is one of the tools to promote integration. And this is done in many ways. Others from our side, we do it through the promotion of skills development among the youth, especially, and also education, peace education among the children, so that they don't carry the scar of the war in their own countries and begin dividing among themselves here between ethnic groups and all that, but to grow in the spirit of peace among the refugees themselves, as well as between the refugees and the host community, and try to see how can they be productive together and how can they promote their well-being and dignity within the Ugandan context. So leaving it on that, we are going to see what our colleagues from Malawi would be able to give us, to be able to share with us, to give us a context of Malawi. And we would straight go to Titani Charila, a principal law reformer, to be able to share with us. You have had an opportunity, Titani, to engage in the migration refugee space from practice to policy review and formulation. Can you tell us a bit more on the Malawian context in relation to migrants and refugees, and to show us what are some of the challenges that refugees face from policy intervention and then practice and the real life of refugees in Malawi? Maybe in 10 minutes to be able to share with us, so that our sister Angela would be able to add on that. Welcome, Titani. Titani will not be able to air with the video due to internet challenges, but I think we'll be able to listen to him. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Rogers, and thank you all. As already introduced, I'm Titani Jalila, a Principal Law Reform Officer at the Malawi Law Commission in Malawi. Just as a bit of a background, historically, in Malawi, we had our first refugee camp established in one of the districts that borders Mozambique. The camp was called Luani. That was in 1977. However, we had no law as a host community to govern the management of refugees. It was more or less an ad hoc arrangement where the government managed the situation as it saw fit. And you must also note that it was a time where we had a dictatorial regime, and mostly it had no respect for human rights. So whatever the arrangement was, it wasn't much focusing on the rights of the people, but still more there was that camp. And eventually, when the situation in Mozambique escalated in the 80s, there was a need to have a law in place, and that's when we had the 1989 Refugees Act. So mostly it was put in place to address the Mozambican situation. It never foresaw the emergence of migrants or refugees from other parts of the continent or different parts of the world. So the 1989 Refugees Act came in place, and in 1994 we had another camp called Dzaleka. This was an improvisation of a place which was formerly a political prisoners detention camp. It had the initial holding capacity of 10,000 people, but as I'm talking today, it holds 60,000 people. So this camp, despite putting together all refugees, it does not have other requisite facilities like sanitation facilities and other requirements that can support such a huge number. Just also note, one of the challenges we have is the definition of who a refugee is in itself. In our local language, it is called Otawanghondo, those fleeing war. That brings itself limitations in terms of how the host community does perceive people who have moved to this country for various reasons. Everyone else is reduced to a person as Otawanghondo, or someone who is fleeing war. So definitely the attitudes are different. Over time, we have had in the refugee camp at Dzaleka, people from East Africa, mostly Rwanda, Burundi, Ethiopia, DRC, who have also found themselves as refugees at this camp. Unlike the situation with the Mozambican refugees, who are closely similar in terms of their cultures and languages, these ones from East Africa are a bit different. So currently, Malawi has a refugee population that exceeds 60,000. In addition to holding such a big number of refugees, these people do face a number of challenges. Most of the challenges have to do with the refugee determination status process itself. This process involves almost 3 or 4 stakeholders. At the inception, we have the immigration department, and the immigration department works in 2 phases. We have holding facilities in some districts, like border districts in the northern part of the country called Karonga and Chitipa. When people arrive at such places, they are vetted, and some do face immediate rejection at the inception point. But for those that are successful at that point, they have their clearance document given for further processing. And this process then is handled by the Ministry of Homeland Security, which has a refugee department and has a designated commissioner for refugees. And with this department, they record the story of the person who is an asylum seeker at this point, and they collect their data. And in the end, they do process a fact sheet, which is given to UNHCR. The application for refugee status determination faces a number of challenges because the review of the status determination and the decision itself is made by a committee which is placed in the same ministry. And whenever a person faces rejection of their determination status, an appeal lies with the same minister. And mostly, it is also a challenge that sometimes it depends on what the government wants at that time. So these people are at the mercy of the government. And mostly it's because we are using the 1989 Refugees Act, which came in place when we were still under a one-party system, which was dictatorial, and we had not embraced democracy. So we still have challenges to respect the rights of these people. And these people also face another challenge in terms of perceptions that people have over them. It is a predominant perception among certain quarters in the country that these people receive a lot of money from UNHCR, and in so doing, they are a threat in terms of business competition with the locals because they have more capital as compared to the locals. But in fact, these people do receive a meager $10 a month, which only sustains them for a week or two. For them to proceed and survive for a month, they have to devise other means and establish other relations with the locals nearby the refugee camp. So they face that challenge of being perceived as well off as compared to their friends. And mostly others argue that when you find people from Rwanda, they say maybe this country is a bit developed than us as a host community. Why are these people moving from such a developed state to find themselves in a state that is less developed? I think this comes from the very same perception that refugees are people who are fleeing war. They forget that sometimes people are moving out just because they are facing political persecution, or there are other reasons like ethnic cleansing and other things that might force people to move from their places, even though they are developed. So my experience as a law reformer in the initial stages of the refugees review, the review of the Refugees Act we have, I went to some host communities in the border districts where they stay with the refugees or other migrants who are running businesses in those communities. What was predominant are the very same things of cultural differences and looking at the refugees as threats in terms of, or rather migrants in terms of business opportunities. But in some communities, it was acknowledged that they are helpful because of their talents, and some who are well off in terms of business and also have a better way in terms of managing businesses, which some of the locals have learned a lot from. And the mixed reactions from the host community are somehow good in the sense that people are open to live with these people and respect them. But also, whenever challenges are met with these people, they are able to get protection from the relevant authorities. Of recent, the government has also had challenges with the refugee community. So as a host, the authorities have weaponized the process of making sure that refugees are in camps and are not integrated in the communities. That's one way of convincing the locals that they are trying to create more business opportunities, which were being taken up by the refugees. So unlike Uganda, in Malawi, the policy is more enclosed. We still practice the encampment policy whereby all migrants and refugees have to stay in one place, and there's no room for actual integration into the community. Of course, Malawi has signed the comprehensive refugees framework, which talked of integration, and with that, it gave permits to some refugees who were now operating businesses in different parts of the country. But unfortunately, with change of government, of leadership, that is, the current government did not adhere to those permits, and had all people who were operating businesses in different places returned back to the camp. And the camp has been facing challenges because the numbers have swelled, and yet the facilities that can support such numbers are not in place. So all in all, I would say our situation is changing for the better because now the government has committed to review the law that is in place to make sure that we balance integration, respect for human rights, and also putting a human face to the whole situation and have the migrants and refugees respected, just as we do with the locals. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Titani, for giving us that elaborate, very contextual, and also the experience of Malawi. And I think there is some sort of comparison to see what happens in Uganda, as well as what happens in Malawi at a policy level, as well as in the area of practice and integration. Moving forward, I think we would be happy to hear as well the voice of Angela, to give us a hint of the situation of Malawi. As a lawyer, Angela, you have led a number of policy reviews in the Malawian context, and particularly reviewing Malawi's refugee policy to meet international standards. Can you somehow tell us your passions related to refugee integration and your view on the current refugee policy in Malawi? In that context, and then maybe you can further extend, although Chalila has touched a little bit, what is the role of the individuals, the communities, and the state towards the refugees? Angela, you are most welcome.
Thank you so much, Rogers. Hello, everyone. I hope you can all hear and see me. Can you hear and see me?
We can hear you, but I think the camera is mute from your side, but you can still continue.
All right. As already introduced, my name is Angela Mwaflilwa. Like the previous speaker, I'm also from Malawi, and I work for the Law Commission. Much has already been said by the previous speaker. I'm just going to build on what has already been said about the situation in Malawi. Before I proceed, I would like to say that integration of refugees is indeed a complex and multifaceted process that goes beyond mere legal formalities. However, we need to have a starting point. So, as the previous speaker has already said, we indeed need legislation that is going to guide how the refugee community is regulated in Malawi. First, I would like to talk about my passion. I would like to say that most of the problems that are faced by refugees in Malawi, for example, with access to basic necessities and the enjoyment of rights such as the right to health, right to work, right to education, stem from the fact that Malawi, while being a party to the 1951 Convention, entered a reservation to Article 26, which provides for the right to movement. And as we are aware, human rights are interdependent and they are inextricably linked, to the extent that restricting the right to movement when it comes to refugees also has a bearing on other rights. So I think the areas that are highly challenging for refugees in Malawi are access to education. The fact that refugee children are able to access elementary education while in the camp is not enough. I think there's need for provision of more access to secondary school and tertiary education. Apart from that, I think the fact that the law does not allow refugees to take part in wage earning employment is problematic because they do not have access to to the labor market, and they cannot participate in the economy, in so much that we have refugees who are resident in the camp who are skilled and they can fend for themselves, but for the fact that they are restricted, they are not able to earn a living. And another thing is that currently refugees do not have, I should call them refugees and asylum seekers, do not have access to a long-term solution to the problem of statelessness, and where they were born in Malawi but have lived in the country for a long time, they do not have access to citizenship. So I think if there is a way that the law would be reviewed to cater for those needs, the law would better uphold rights of refugees. In terms of community responsibilities, I think individuals have a way to facilitate a sense of friendship, brotherhood with refugees. The first example I'd give is that of the Burundian community. I think in Malawi, we have seen that they are very active in trade. In the outskirts of our towns, Burundians have established themselves in the markets. They are very active in selling groceries. I think the communities have been very responsive. However, there have been others who have raised concerns that they are, in a way, competitive and they are aggressive in the market. However, I think by showing a willingness to participate in the economy, they have contributed positively in the communities that have been hosted. Another thing I would like to say is I think refugees have a very big challenge when it comes to access to land. As it is, refugees are confined in the camp and they do not have access to land. Most of the refugees are only allowed to a very restricted area of land that they cannot sustainably grow things from, or in any. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. You continue.
Okay. So I think if there is a way that the chiefs in the communities can have dialogue with refugees, the refugee community would be able to benefit from host communities. Another way is for both local and international organizations, if they were able to provide support services outside the camp, not inside the camp, because in the camp, there are limited opportunities available to refugees. For example, they can only work as volunteers, while if there is a way that the law paves way for settlement of refugees outside the camp, they'll be able to explore other industries. They might be able to explore other vocational trainings that they can have. They can be able to participate in business better. I think that way, the Malawian community would be friendlier to the refugee community. But as it is, I think the law is not so friendly. It is, the legal terrain is, I should say, hostile to refugees. However, from my work as a law reform officer, I have interacted with several government institutions, ministries, departments. I think there is hope, there is an emerging consensus that refugee management is not only about dealing with refugees as a security issue. We should not view refugees as a threat to national security or the public order, but that we should be able to strike a balance between interests of citizens, locals, and also accord refugees and asylum seekers the chance to exercise their rights, in that by formulating legislation that is responsive to the needs and the rights of refugees, we should be able to manage the situation better. For example, some of the thematic areas touch on how the law can provide better for vulnerable groups, such as women, children, and the elderly. Currently, the law does not really pay attention to the rights of such groups who are in confinement in the camp. However, from the consensus that is emerging in formulating the refugee law, I think we're going to have a law that is better suited to handling issues such as this, and we're going to have a law that is human rights based. So I think for me, I have seen a paradigm shift from a law that only looked at managing refugees as a security issue to developing something which is human rights based and progressive in reacting to the needs of refugees and asylum seekers. I think for me, that will be all for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Angela, for giving us your perspective, and especially in relation to what Titani said. Indeed, there is some sort of comparative analysis between the context of Malawi as well as the Ugandan context. And in the process of integration, we can see the hard work challenges that comes either from the perspective of the law, from the perspective of the policy, as well as how the communities welcome the refugees. And we can see that Uganda seems to present a context where a particular group of refugees can easily integrate, of course, with challenges, though the Eritreans also face their own dynamics, but Malawi gives its own context. And on that, looking at the time that we have, possibly we will need, maybe if there are one or two questions, and I can pass the ball to Innocent to guide us in that perspective. Thank you so much to the panel. And Innocent, I think you can now lead us into the next aspect. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Brother Rogers, and your team from Malawi and Uganda, and giving us really insight of the joys and the challenges in terms of integration and navigating the belonging together. Of course, situations are different, and we learn from each other. Uganda seems to be much more advanced in terms of policy and open door policy towards the refugees, but also Malawi is making an effort through the legal practitioners who are working for migrants, refugees, displaced people, and asylum seekers. Yeah, so we can learn a lot from. As I said, we'll be expecting that the papers that you will be handing over to us will also come with a concrete proposal as the way forward. I think there is a lot which is being done, even from the legal perspective in Malawi. So there is a hope for the future, and that situation will be improved, I mean, in terms of policies and so on, to face the challenges of, increasing migration, forced migration because of wars, as we have said. So we have about 10 minutes of interaction. And once again, thank you very much for this wonderful presentation. And then afterwards, we will end the Africa panel at this moment, and then we will be moving towards the European hub with our brothers in Frankfurt. So welcome. Anyone who has a question? So there's somebody managing the online YouTube, but so far there's no comments. So we can have comments just on Zoom. Welcome. Any question, remark? Yeah. Maybe let's start. Let me start a question from our colleagues from Malawi as a takeaway from the Ugandan experience. What would be your takeaway from the Ugandan experience after having listened to which can improve your legal practice in Malawi?
As I take away from the Ugandan experience, I think the issue of integration comes out strongly. We are yet to move in that direction, considering that the current law does not necessarily support that. It just happens that in some leaders go for it and others against it. But we need to have a law so that we are so certain when it comes to working towards integration and respecting the rights of the refugees and immigrants. So the Ugandan experience is more open, which we can learn a lot from, and then adopt that in the review which we are carrying on. But as Angela alluded to, I think we are already moving in that direction, considering the experiences that some authorities from different departments of government shared in the process of the review, that they are also looking forward to integration and to depart from the current prevalent perception that the refugees are a national security issue. So now they shouldn't be treated as a national security issue only, but they should be taken as people with the valid concerns and with the same dignity that the locals have, and that they should be accorded all the rights that they need to have. So a takeaway is integration and moving towards respecting their rights and making sure they are given all that is needed for a person to thrive. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chalira. One of the idea that we had in mind in organizing this conference, it was just to look at the refugees, displaced people, migrants, and asylum seekers, not as a problem, but to focus also on their contribution to local economies and integration and so on. So my question is to both in Uganda and in Malawi, is there any effort to document positively, the positive impact of the refugees in the host countries?
Yes. And in our case, I think I've worked with some refugees in the program called Tumaini Letu. They have a festival. I think it is the first festival to be held in a refugee camp in the world. This festival brings a lot of commercial activity, and it is also a tourist attraction activity of significance in the country. So it was put together by refugees and migrants with the Treza Mpauni as the lead. This has changed the lives of a lot of refugees and even the communities around, because whenever this festival is held towards the end of every year, people flock to the camp from the country and from without, from even as far as the US and Italy or other countries. So they bring in loads and loads of business opportunities to the locals and to the refugees themselves. And at the end of the day, the same festival has opened up the minds of the locals in terms of the perception they held of the refugees. They now see them as amongst people, they see them as their own people. So they are able to relate with them. And mostly, we haven't had the trouble with the migrants or refugees in terms of being hostile to the locals, except for few cases which are justifiable. But generally, they are good people who have taught people how to do business and to live in a different way. So it's quite positive, and the stories of Tumaini in this case are well documented. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's one initiative which brought to the change of perception between the host communities and the migrants, because they can see concretely what the contribution of the migrants, refugees, and displaced people can bring to the community. What about in Uganda? Is there any effort to document some of those positive impact of the refugees on so that we don't see them only as a problem, but also their positive impact on the economy and social life?
Yeah, thank you, Father. I would speak about their contribution in two ways. One, economic-wise, it is very evident. The kind of businesses that, for example, I wouldn't hesitate to say that one of the biggest oil suppliers, gas and oil suppliers, petrol stations in Kampala is we have Haas, we have City Oil, and many of them are run by Somalis. We have the hotel industry. We have Eritreans putting up very beautiful hotels and restaurants. And then what happens from Uganda is these are lessons you can learn. How to do business. They have a very, especially the Eritreans and Somalis, their business acumen is very interesting. These are Eritreans running a cosmetic shop, and what they do is they target any customer who's coming out from a supermarket, and they will just say, just come and sell, just come and sell, come and see. So for me, these are things that we can learn from them, to improve our businesses and also running our economies. Then secondly, I would speak about worship. It's a research that I'm currently looking at. I booked 2 appointments for this month to have conversations with 2 Catholic priests, a parish priest, and also 2 parish priests in 2 different parishes in Kampala here. Because I understand, I just want to know the kind of programs probably that they have for the Eritrean refugees when they come. That they have special programs for them, for those that have special masses. I'm looking at, and probably this is the challenge for the Catholic Church here in Uganda. Is it just enough probably to give them space? Maybe every Sunday you can come and worship at midday after the local masses are done. How about having a mixed liturgy? Because we're all Catholics, it's the same liturgy. How about having it mixed? How about, so that we can see how the liturgy can be enriched, learning ABC, the kind of songs that we use to worship and praise. There are the kind of things that I've seen. So when it comes to worship, I'm seeing a gap there that probably from the perspective of religious worship that can be, used to help change the perceptions, the local perceptions amongst the hosts, so that we can, it can help us to view or perceive refugees not as a burden, but also as people that we can actually live amongst. It also increases the points of contact between parishioners and people who have come to worship from the two different communities. They're the two things I would probably share. Thank you.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Maybe I'll just give the last word to the chair of the panel. I mean, also what you've learned from this, the interaction between Uganda and Malawi, and what would be maybe the way forward.
Yeah, thank you so much, Innocent, and thank you so much to all the panelists. Indeed, it has been an enlightful conversation. And talking about the question that Innocent raised, indeed, in Uganda, there's a lot of documentation when it comes to the integration of refugees. UN has been doing a lot of what they call stakeholder performance index that emanates from how the different programs are helping refugees to integrate in the local community, as well as the performance of different stakeholders, including humanitarian actor. So that has clearly shown that Ugandan perspective is looking at the refugees as assets and not necessarily as burdens. And I think this is a takeaway for the Malawian context. And we can see that there is a lot of progress also that is being done at the policy level, but also at the grassroots level in Malawi, there is also a lot of progress with regard to the relationship between the host and the refugee as well. I think the most impeding part is that the Malawian context doesn't necessarily allow much more interaction between the refugees and the host community because of the encampment policy. Whilst Uganda is more of a settlement policy, the integration and conversation and interaction between the refugees and the host community is high. On the contrary, the Malawian context presents a minimal interaction and contact because of the nature of the policies. One is more of encampment, the other one is more of a resettlement system. And I think the two countries have a lot in common. However, there is a lot that the Malawian context can learn from the Ugandan perspective. So just to conclude, I would say that there is one key important that stands out, and this is mentioned strongly in Fratelli Tutti, and this is the aspect of solidarity. And I think the integration process cannot be effective if the principle of solidarity is not maximized and is not taken as an essence towards the relationship and brotherhood and sisterhood between the refugees and the host community. I think we can end there. Thank you so much for the viewer, and thanks for the time that you have given us to be able to share from the perspective of Malawi and Uganda. And thank you so much, Innocent, for guiding us through this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, as I will be looking forward also to the papers. And now I will allow our technician, Yusuf, now to connect now, because he's also managing both hubs, the America hub, the Africa hub, and the European hub. Is doing a great job. Thank you very much, everyone, and thank also to Harmony Institute under the leadership of Yusuf. Thank you very much, and looking forward to interacting even in the future in our